Chapter 1: The Wake-Up Call. A rhythmic beeping dragged Clara Lawson out of the darkness. It was distant at first, like an echo traveling through a long tunnel, but it grew louder, more insistent, pulling her back to the surface. Her eyelids felt like they were weighed down by lead, but she forced them open. The world around her was blurred, harsh white lights, sterile walls, the scent of antiseptic burning in her nose. A hospital. Her head throbbed, and when she lifted her hand to touch her temple, she found a thick bandage wrapped around her forehead. A slow panic spread through her chest as she tried to sit up, but a dull pain shot through her ribs, forcing her back down. What happened? She closed her eyes, searching her mind, and then flashes of the accident hit her all at once. The blinding headlights, the screech of tires, the gut-wrenching impact. She gasped. Was anyone else hurt? Mark, her husband, the kids. Were they in the car? A wave of nausea rolled through her as she reached for the call button beside the bed. Before she could press it, the door creaked open and a nurse walked in, glancing at the monitors before noticing Clara's wide, frantic eyes. "You're awake," the nurse said, her voice calm but careful. Clara swallowed against the dryness in her throat. "Where's my family?" Her voice cracked. "My husband, my kids, where are they?" The nurse hesitated. It was only for a second, but Clara caught it. That pause. That subtle shift in expression. The nurse cleared her throat. "You should rest. You've been through a lot." "No." Clara's heart pounded. "Where are they?" The nurse pursed her lips, then sighed. "I'll get the doctor." Clara watched her disappear down the hall, dread curling in her stomach. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. Her hands shook as she reached for the remote on the bed, fumbling with the buttons until the small TV mounted on the wall flickered to life. A news anchor's voice filled the room. "Survived the impact." The crash, which occurred late Saturday night, claimed the life of 34-year-old Clara Lawson, a beloved wife and mother of two. Clara's entire body went cold. The screen showed a photo of her, one from last year's family vacation. She was smiling in the image, arms wrapped around her children. Below her name, the words "tragic loss" were written in bold. "No," she whispered. This wasn't real. Her breath came in short gasps. She clawed at the blankets, shaking, trying to process what she was seeing. She was dead. She stared at her own obituary, her own smiling face, frozen in time. The room spun. The sound of her heartbeat thundered in her ears. She was alive, but the world thought she was dead. And worse, somehow, someone had let them believe it. Chapter 2: A Stranger in My Life. Clara's hands shook as she gripped the newspaper she had found at the nurse's station. Her obituary was real. The world thought she was gone, but she was right here, alive, breathing. She didn't wait for the doctor. She needed to go home. Still dizzy, she yanked the IV from her arm, gritting her teeth at the sting. Her body protested with every movement, but she forced herself to stand. Her hospital gown was thin and flimsy, so she grabbed a coat from an unattended rack in the hallway and slipped it on. Her escape was easier than she expected. No one stopped her. No alarms rang. She was just a ghost slipping through the cracks. The air outside was cold, the sky a dull gray. She hailed a cab with trembling fingers, barely able to tell the driver her address. Her heart pounded harder the closer they got. The taxi pulled up in front of her house, a place she had lived in for years, raised her children in, but something about it felt different. She stepped onto the sidewalk. The front porch light was on, the curtains drawn just enough for her to see inside. And then she saw her. A woman stood in her living room wearing Clara's favorite sweater. She wasn't just inside Clara's home. She belonged there. Clara's breath caught in her throat as the woman turned slightly, revealing her face. It was like looking into a distorted mirror. The woman looked just like her. Same dark brown hair, same delicate features. But there was something off. Slight differences in posture, the way she moved. Clara staggered backward. Who the hell was she? Then Mark entered the room. Her husband. Clara's heart leapt. She wanted to run to him, scream his name. But then he did something that shattered her world all over again. He walked over to the woman, pressed a kiss to her forehead, wrapped his arms around her. Clara's stomach lurched. Her pulse pounded in her ears. She watched as her husband held a woman who wasn't her, but who was living her life. And then the worst part. Her children ran into the room, laughing. "Mom!" her daughter squealed, jumping into the imposter's arms. Clara felt like she was drowning. She staggered back onto the sidewalk, her breaths coming in ragged gasps. Uh, this, this wasn't just someone living in her house. This was someone who had taken her place, and her family didn't even notice. Chapter 3: Unraveling the Lie. Clara stood outside her own house, her pulse hammering in her ears. The night air pressed in around her, but she barely felt it. Her family was inside, her husband, her children, but they were embracing a stranger. She clenched her fists. No, not a stranger. Someone who had studied her, learned her life, slipped seamlessly into her place. The betrayal burned in her chest. They should have known. Her children should have felt it. Mark should have seen the difference. How could they not realize? A deep, twisting dread curled in her stomach. What if they did? Clara shook her head violently. No, that was impossible. She needed proof. She would not be erased. Breaking in. Waiting until the lights dimmed inside, Clara moved to the back of the house where she and Mark had once hidden a spare key under the porch. Her fingers scraped against the cold metal. Still there. She hesitated. This was her home. But tonight it felt like she was trespassing in her own life. Swallowing hard, she let herself in. The moment she stepped inside, an eerie sensation washed over her. Everything was familiar, but wrong. The smell of lavender and vanilla lingered in the air, her usual candles, but it was too strong, too artificial. The photos on the wall were still there, still smiling. But as she stepped closer, she felt her breath catch in her throat. The woman in the pictures wasn't her. It was her. But it wasn't. The face was almost hers, but the eyes looked slightly different. The smile wasn't quite the same. The photos had been altered. Her heart pounded. This wasn't a mistake. Someone had replaced her. Disturbing discovery. Moving quickly, Clara rushed upstairs to their bedroom. Her bedroom. She opened the closet. Her clothes were still there, but something felt off. She reached for one of her sweaters, the same one she had seen the woman wearing earlier. The fabric was softer, newer. She checked the bedside table. The book she had been reading before the accident sat there. But when she flipped through it, the bookmark was in the wrong place. It was a subtle detail, something only she would notice. Her stomach twisted. She turned toward Mark's dresser. A silver jewelry box rested on top. Her jewelry box. Her fingers trembled as she opened it, then stopped cold. Her wedding ring was gone. Instead, a single note lay inside, written in her own handwriting. But she knew she hadn't written it. Some things are better left buried. A chill ran down her spine. This imposter wasn't just playing a role. She was erasing Clara's existence. Footsteps creaked downstairs. Clara froze. Someone was awake. Her pulse spiked as she heard slow, deliberate steps moving toward the stairs. She slipped into the bathroom, pressing herself against the wall, heart hammering. The steps reached the hallway. A shadow passed under the door, and then a soft whisper. "I know you're here." Clara's blood ran cold. The imposter knew, and she wasn't afraid. Chapter 4: The Woman Who Replaced Me. Clara didn't breathe. She pressed herself against the cold bathroom wall, every muscle in her body locked as the shadow outside the door stilled. "I know you're here." The voice was hers, but it wasn't. It was too perfect, too practiced. Clara clenched her jaw. This woman had stolen everything from her. The floor creaked. She was moving away. Clara waited 10 seconds, 20, then risked cracking the door open. The hallway was empty. Now she slipped out, stepping lightly, forcing herself to ignore the family photos on the walls, photos where she had been erased. She made it to the stairs, gripping the railing as she descended. Her fingers brushed against the polished wood, except it wasn't the same polish she used. Small changes, twisted details. She had to get out. But as she reached the door, a hand slammed onto her wrist. Clara gasped, whirling around, and found herself staring back at her. The imposter. She stood in Clara's home, in Clara's body, and smiled. Leaving so soon? Up close, the resemblance was even more disturbing. She wasn't just similar to Clara, she was identical. But her eyes, cold, calculating, amused. The woman tilted her head. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Clara's breath came in sharp bursts. "Who are you?" she demanded. The woman gave a small, mocking laugh. "That's funny. Shouldn't I be asking you that?" Clara yanked her arm free. "This is my house, my family." The imposter's expression didn't change. "Are you sure?" She stepped forward, casually, as if she belonged here. As far as I can tell, she said, voice smooth as silk, I'm the one they love. I'm the one they grieved. I tucked your daughter into bed tonight. I kissed your husband. Clara's stomach twisted violently. She knew. This woman knew intimate details of her life, things a stranger couldn't possibly know. How? Clara's voice was hoarse. Who the hell are you? The imposter's smile didn't falter. But this time, it changed. Became cruel. You already know. Clara's mind was racing. She thought about the subtle changes in her home, the near-perfect imitation of her handwriting, the way the imposter knew everything about her family. This wasn't just a stranger. This was someone who had been watching, studying, waiting. And then, for the first time, she truly looked at her. She wasn't just identical to Clara. She was Clara. Or rather, a version of Clara she had long forgotten. A memory surfaced. A little girl, a twin, a name whispered in childhood before it disappeared forever. A name buried by her mother's tears. Evelyn. The imposter, Evelyn, smirked. Clara felt sick. Her twin, her sister. Evelyn folded her arms. Took you long enough. Clara shook her head. No, that's not possible. I don't have a sister. That's what they told you, Evelyn said smoothly. They lied. Our mother lied. She gave me away like a piece of trash, and you, she gestured at Clara, eyes darkening, got the perfect life. Clara's world tilted. A twin. She had a twin, and she never knew. Why? Clara whispered, her throat tight. Why would she give you up? Evelyn's jaw clenched. Because she was weak. Because she was scared. Because she wanted to forget. The words burned. Clara staggered back. And what? You thought you could just take my life? My family? Evelyn's gaze darkened. I didn't think. I did. And then, stepping closer, she lowered her voice. And guess what, sister, she whispered. They like me better. Clara snapped. She lunged. Evelyn grabbed her first. The two crashed into the wall, struggling, their identical faces twisted in fury. Evelyn was strong, too strong. Clara stumbled, her vision swimming. Still weak from the accident, Evelyn leaned in, lips brushing against her ear. You're already dead, Clara, she whispered. Then, Clara's world went black. Chapter 5, The Family's Dark Secret. Darkness. Clara drifted in and out of consciousness, her body heavy, her head throbbing. Somewhere in the distance, she heard muffled voices. Keep her quiet. Not yet. A chill crept up her spine. Evelyn. Memories crashed back all at once. The struggle, the revelation, the sharp pain before everything had gone black. She had a twin, a sister she never knew existed. And now, Evelyn had taken everything from her. Clara's eyes fluttered open. She was in a dimly lit room, her hands tied behind her. The air was damp, musty. A basement. Panic rose in her throat. She struggled against the restraints, but the rope bit into her skin. Footsteps. Clara snapped her head up just as Evelyn stepped into the light. You really should be thanking me, Evelyn said, arms crossed. You had a good run. Clara's voice was hoarse. You won't get away with this. Evelyn laughed. I already have. She crouched in front of Clara, tilting her head. You still don't get it, do you? This wasn't just some crazy idea I had. This was fate. Clara swallowed hard. What the hell are you talking about? Evelyn's smile faded. You really don't remember anything, do you? She murmured. Clara's pulse quickened. Something in Evelyn's tone chilled her to the bone. The forgotten sister. Evelyn sighed and leaned back against the wall. Fine. Story time. She tapped her fingers against her knee, watching Clara with an unreadable expression. Our mother, she started, was a liar. A coward. She had 2 daughters. Twins. But she only wanted one. Clara's breath caught. No, she whispered, Lice. That doesn't make sense. Evelyn's expression darkened. Oh, but it does. You see, we were born into a family curse. Our grandmother was a twin. So was our great-grandmother. And every generation, one twin always. She trailed off, eyes gleaming. Dies, Clara finished, her voice barely a whisper. Evelyn nodded. Exactly, buried secrets. Clara's stomach twisted. That's ridiculous. Evelyn smiled bitterly. Tell that to Mom. She believed it. She was terrified that if we both lived, something terrible would happen. So she made a choice. Clara's breathing was shallow. No, that's not true. Evelyn leaned in. Then tell me this, Clara. Why don't you have any memories before you were 5? The question slammed into her like a wrecking ball. Her mind reeled. She couldn't remember. Bits and pieces, faint images, a house she didn't recognize, shadows moving in the corners of her mind, but no solid memories. Her entire childhood before 5 years old was blank. Evelyn grinned. Because they erased me. Mom and Dad didn't just give me away. They wiped me from your life. They sent me to a foster home, let me rot while you got the perfect little life. Clara shook her head violently. No. That's not, but crept in. Her mother had always been overprotective. Never let her ask too many questions about her past. And then another memory flashed. A whisper in the dark. You were meant to be alone. A voice from long ago, her mother's. Her heart cracked open. Evelyn saw it and smiled. You feel it now, don't you? She whispered. The truth. Clara clenched her fists. If you wanted revenge, why didn't you just come after Mom? Evelyn's face twisted with pure hatred. Oh, I did, she said, but I was too late. The cancer got to her before I could, and then I thought, why waste all this anger on a dying woman when I could take what she loved most? Clara's throat tightened. Me, she whispered. Evelyn nodded. She took my life, so I took yours. She stood, brushing off her jeans. And guess what, sister? No one even noticed. Not Mark, not the kids. You were replaceable. Clara's rage boiled over. You'll never be me, she spat. They'll figure it out. Evelyn only smiled. You sure about that? She pulled something from her pocket and held it up. Clara's wedding ring. I don't think they miss you at all. Clara lunged at her, but the ropes held tight. Evelyn just laughed. Now be a good little ghost and stay dead. She turned, heading for the door. Panic surged through Clara. She couldn't let her leave. Evelyn, she shouted. Her twin stopped. Clara's heart pounded. Think. You're wrong, she blurted out. Evelyn turned, brow raised. About what? Clara's mind raced. Mom didn't choose me, she said carefully. She didn't want either of us. She was scared of both of us. Evelyn's smirk faltered. Clara pressed forward. She believed in the curse, right? Clara continued. Then why would she think getting rid of you would stop it? A flicker of doubt crossed Evelyn's face. You said it yourself. Every generation, one twin dies. One survives. But Mom didn't choose which one. She just delayed it. Evelyn's jaw tightened. You don't know what you're talking about. Clara leaned forward. Then why are you so scared? Evelyn's hands clenched at her sides. For the first time, Clara saw something new in her sister's eyes. Doubt. And for the first time, Clara saw a way out.